statue of some general thrusting his sword into the ground behind his boot. But I much preferred the lions. All four of them, their paws draped over pointy medieval shields. "Hi, little buddies," I whispered, reaching toward the stone manes. Rachel came up behind me with a clobbering hug. "Slow down," she whined in my ear. That's when I finally remembered. Dane's text. I shook Rachel off and ripped my phone from my bag, feeling my heartbeat in my neck. Shit! I'd forgotten to hit send on the string of question marks, and so of course my brother hadn't texted back. Sometimes, I wish it had stayed that way. Chapter 1. Maura brought pomegranates to Dane's funeral reception. It was an odd choice, and I mentioned this to Rachel, the hard pew edge biting into my thigh. "What's wrong with pomegranates?" Rachel said. I pictured a halved pomegranate. Those wreaths of slick, pink organs made my skin scuttle over my bones, just like when I looked too closely at a wasp's nest or a strawberry. I'd Googled the sensation. Trypophobia. Fear of holes and circle clusters. But this felt too exhausting to explain in a whisper. Haven't you heard of Persephone and Hades? Referencing eternal damnation to the underworld feels a tad insensitive, today of all days. Rachel's cheek puffed. Okay, Holly. Her eyes were fastened on the pulpit where Maura stood. I had no choice but to look too. My brother's girlfriend was adjusting the stem of a tiny microphone. She had a face that made your mind itch as it tried to pinpoint what felt off. There was definitely something threading under the luminous skin. Inky princess tresses, black eyes, and sharp, bird-like bones that jutted at her clavicle. She wore a birdcage veil with pearled netting at an angle that fell a smidge short of jaunty. Seeing her, gave me a jolt, like missing a step on my way down a staircase. Even speaking at my brother's funeral, Maura needed to enrapture. Dane had brought his new girlfriend to meet the family over Easter brunch. 5 months ago now. Back then, the two of them had been dating only a few weeks. Maura complimented the plasterwork of my childhood home in that musical voice of hers. Uncharacteristically, Mom had nothing critical to say afterward. She has polish, was all she provided. It was undeniable. Maura had dazzled both of my parents. I think, on some level, they doubted Dane's ability to land a girl like her. As I sat in the pew, my fists fizzed with heat. We'd all doubted him. And now, here we were. How would things have turned out differently had we listened? It was a cruel game I often played during the long nights after his suicide, when I knew sleep was futile. What if we'd tried a little harder? Rachel told me I couldn't get swept away in what-ifs. But really, who was she to tell me that? She wasn't the one fighting the riptide, feeling like the past was a puzzle. One that maybe, put together a different way, could have kept my little brother alive. Maura slid a piece of paper over the podium. Rachel put a hand on my knee as Maura started speaking. To my left, my mother's shoulders rounded under her cardigan. I noticed a tiny slack space between my dad's lips. It reminded me of the way he'd looked when he'd told me what had happened to Dane 2 weeks ago. Like he'd lost control of the bottom half of his face. It was the first time I'd seen his dad armor slip, and I hated it. The paper was, it turned out, an excerpt from Charlotte's Web. I had no idea why she'd chosen this. If we're talking animal books, Dane had much preferred Jumanji, leaning toward that edge of danger evident from the very first pages. Until his symptoms became evident a few months ago. He and I had been devastatingly close. I knew his taste in books. Maura read from the paper with the voice of a jewelry box ballerina. The quote she had chosen was from the